It's like I am helping your body do what it's supposed to do. So by clearing your field, your body can fix itself and overcome whatever is in the way.
On the mic with us today is Larry Nardi, a musician, Biofield Tuning Practitioner, and the founder of In Tune Harmonic Wellness.
It's affecting the vibration that's coming back to you. It's affecting your thought process. It's a filter, essentially, that you're putting every experience through. So while one frequency, like a 417, can open you up and maybe help you break through some kind of blockage, and then you take in your 528 and you're able to absorb all the love that it's giving.
Larry is using the power of sound to help people raise their vibration, to help heal any stress or past trauma.
You have these repressed things. A lot of men have it. It's very common. And what we're doing here is we're breaking down that dam, and now all these emotions are flying through that you held down as long as you could. And now they're flying through and you're processing them.
In our interview, Larry pinpoints how everyday sounds and even sound waves may be contributing to our daily stress, and how we can utilize the power of sound to offset this stress to begin experiencing feelings of lightness and peace. I'm your host, Ina Korobkina, founder of Jewel Branding Studios and creator of the Business in Style fashion course for entrepreneurs. And
I'm Ingrid J. Monday, aka Ms. Monday, a photographer and filmmaker and the author of the book, The Secrets of Becoming a Boss Bitch with a Heart of Gold.
welcome to another episode of the Rise Up and Fix It podcast. Dear listener, halfway through recording this episode, ironically on the subject of sound, my sound ended up cutting out. But Larry offered so much incredible value and information. We wanted to avoid scrapping the entire episode, so I dubbed in my questions and comments to Larry after the fact. It is an incredible episode, and Larry is truly the star of it. We really hope you enjoy it.
Hey, Larry, we're super stoked to have you on the show today. As we chatted on the phone in preparation for this podcast, we mentioned that how both Ina and I are interested in sound frequency and the different healing methods. We love talking about raising one's vibe on the show, and we are excited to talk to you about how we can use the power of sound to heal and boost our body's vibes. In season 2, we chatted with a woman named Kathy Painter, and she talked about how we can use things like food to raise our frequency. Well, now we're excited to dive into this conversation and to the world of sound and how it impacts our health and our bodies. So having a sound healer expert like you on the show is really exciting. And as the founder of In Tune Harmonic Wellness, we're pumped to have you share your story with our listeners. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And lucky you, this is something that I talk people's ear off about all the time. So tell me to put on the brakes at some point if you need me to. And I'm happy, always happy to talk sound.
Oh, no worries. So music is all around us, but do we really think about what we're listening to and how it affects our health? And can we use music as a tool for healing? These are all cool topics we'll explore today. But first, Larry, before we answer those questions, we'd love to hear your story. How did you get into sound healing, and what's your journey been like? Like, who's Larry?
Well, my story probably begins the same way a lot of sound healers' story begins, with being a musician. And I'm also continuing as a musician. I'm also always playing and addicted to music. I grew up, my father was a musician, and he played in an 80s wedding band. And my crib was in the bedroom right above their rehearsal space. So I went to bed every night listening to music, constant music. After being a musician for years, I ended up getting into the music industry as an audio engineer. And my job for many years, working for Warner Music Group, was to basically spot check every release we put out for frequencies, frequency issues. Before we print up 500,000 CDs and send them to stores, we want to make sure everything sounded clean and there was no problems. So I spent a long time developing my ear to pick out nuances and frequencies and overtones and things like that. So, come COVID is when the journey shifts. Like for a lot of people, you start thinking more about health and what you're doing on a daily basis that influences your health. And what I was doing was listening to all kinds of music, from children's music to country to death metal to spoken word. Uh, and you start to look back on what was my attitude during this time. What was I listening to? How did it affect who I am going through this? So, long story short, my job and I parted ways, and I went freelance as an engineer for a while. And all the time, starting to slowly research some of the effects of certain frequencies on the human body. And that brought me to Eileen McCusick's work, who started Biofield Tuning, which essentially is tuning the human body through the field that surrounds us. I like to refer, in like layman's term, it's like your vibe. Everything vibrates, everybody vibrates. You've got this field, like when you throw something in the water and you see a ripple. We all have one of those. And the ripple changes depending on what kind of information we're taking in, and that includes different sounds. So I took the dive and trained as a biofield tuning practitioner during COVID. So it was all online, and did about a year and a half of training. And now I work out of an office in Stamford, Connecticut, seeing patients for biofield tuning. And I also make music using my forks and my guitars tuned to certain frequencies for healing. And I don't know if I mentioned that biofield tuning predominantly uses forks when we're treating people. So that's kind of what brought me here. It's always been music, frequencies, sound. It's been a constant in my life. And I like to tell people that I decided to use my powers for good instead of evil.
Great.
That's amazing. Wow.
Right.
So are we born vibrating at a certain frequency, and then as we pick up certain experiences through life, our vibe changes?
Well,
Is that
yeah.
how it works? Yeah.
Yes and no. We are born with a certain frequency, but our frequency is also, even at birth, is affected by generational trauma, stuff like
Oh.
that. Was the moment of conception. Anything can affect your frequency. I've had clients in my office who, I would find something in their field that would indicate it was while they were in the womb, something going on. And it turns out that during conception, the mother-father relationship wasn't the greatest. There were certain details that were a little ugly or not typical, and that affects the baby. I mean, you're inside of someone who's vibrating, so all those vibrations are also going to affect you. And we do find generational trauma in people's fields. Stuff that's carried on from our grandparents or whoever down the line. So we all are born vibrating, but we're all born vibrating differently.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. When my kids were actually, it's interesting that you talk about when you were born, because when my kids were born, they would fall asleep listening to 528 hertz frequencies, because I don't know, I saw this thing on Instagram.
Good for you.
Whereas there was this guy, like, he was hitting a tuning fork and the baby was crying, and all of a sudden it just stopped crying.
Yep.
And I was like, what is that frequency? I need that frequency. I need my babies to fall asleep at night and have a sound, beautiful sleep. So there was something about that frequency that I felt soothing, and that my kids just resonated with it. So can you explain maybe like different frequencies? How do they influence us? Like, what are, the brainwave activity? What does it do to your mental state, certain frequencies?
Well, 528 specifically is associated with love. It's called the love frequency. It's also associated with DNA repair. It's a very powerful frequency. And the number one thing any kid wants to feel is love. I mean, I guess that's the number one thing any of us want to feel. But different frequencies correlate with different things, and they all work together. Your chakras correlate with different frequencies, and we know our chakras are a system that work together. So while one frequency, like a 417, can open you up and maybe help you break through some kind of blockage, and then you take in your 528 and you're able to absorb all the love that it's giving. So that's just an example of how certain frequencies affect us differently, yet still kind of work together. There's a spectrum, and one of the things I tell people is that sometimes people ask what's like the best frequency to use, and it is a system, and it's really the solfeggio system is kind of like the basis of those frequencies. And there's a few that work together. And the way people really know the solfege system is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's the basis of every sound and every frequency. And it goes all the way back to like Pythagoras. It goes back to St. John the Baptist. This is ancient stuff that is embedded in our bodies. So it's not only is it just it's genetic. We are made to be absorbing these kind of frequencies. These are frequencies that we find in the earth. When you're grounding outside, your feet are on the earth. That's vibrating. It's a really important thing that we don't do anymore.
Yeah.
And I like to tell people that it's just, I can give you specific frequencies for certain things, but the list is kind of endless.
Yeah.
And there's just so many benefits. And at the same time, I think there's also bad frequencies. We don't highlight those. But personally, I like to look at Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, things like that. As I call them bad. I guess the verdict isn't really out yet, but it seems like people have been a little crazier since Wi-Fi and all that stuff has come out. So I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say those frequencies aren't the greatest for us.
And we're surrounded by these frequencies. It's part of our world now. In order to even communicate like this and record this podcast, we have to be on Wi-Fi. So can we use tuning and music to cancel out the adverse effects that Wi-Fi might have on us?
Well, that's exactly what Biofield Tuning does, and I like to tell people, if you look at your body as an instrument, as a guitar, there's 6 strings, and when they're in tune, and you put your fingers in the right place, it makes a beautiful chord. If the strings are out of tune, you can put your fingers in the right place and play it, but it's going to sound bad. Even if one string is off, right? It doesn't even need to be a lot. Yeah. So Biofield tuning, essentially, if you're letting bad frequencies make you out of tune, we bring in the good frequencies to tune you back up. Lovely. So your body can work efficiently and play that beautiful chord,
Yeah, I'm actually an avid meditator, and I use this technique when I meditate called brainwave vibration, and so I move, it gets me hyper, and like instead of sitting there in a calm state, I'm just like I'm bouncing all over the place. And then I also at the same time I listen to alpha music, and since I've been doing that, I've realized like I'm able to go into this super deep meditation quickly and then maintain it for a very, very long time. To explain to our listeners a little bit about that.
Specifically, it's hard. I don't know a lot about the science behind it, but I do know that a lot of the frequencies we use are meant to try to get you into those states quicker. So when you can meditate with silence and get to that theta state.
Yeah.
But what you're doing, listening to the alpha waves and stuff like that, is essentially like giving you your meditation steroids and getting me that push to go further and deeper quicker. And in modern society, no one's in those states anymore. We're always on the go. We're always taking in information, and those states are so palpable now because we don't feel them anymore. Or maybe if you meditated 50 years ago, it wouldn't feel as strong because in contrast to what you're feeling normally, it's not that different. But now it's just we're being bombarded from every angle. So those brain states, if you can get yourself there, it's so important. That's the silence when you sit in the woods and listen to a river or something like that. And where do you even find that unless you live in the woods by a river? It's so hard to find these spaces to get there, So these frequencies you're using and stuff are kind of the solution to that, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. The talking about going back to talk about trauma that builds up in the body, that elicits emotions, and emotions have their own frequencies. So I imagine when someone comes to work with you, the balancing of the emotions, it's two frequencies kind of canceling each other out. Is that the right way to think of it?
Yeah, well, or I like to say it's just kind of a disturbance in your field sometimes. So the way it works is your vibes and we've all seen someone walk in a room and you can feel right away if they're angry or sad. You know, there are vibes, and you could probably close your eyes, and if they walked in, still feel it, you know, and that's their vibe interacting with your vibe, right? So experiences in our life, trauma, things like that, they leave little patches of dissonance in our vibe. So when we're vibrating, it's kind of like your biofield circulates out of your body and back in. So when you have these issues in your biofield, it's affecting the vibration that's coming back to you. It's affecting your thought process. It's a filter, essentially, that you're putting every experience through. So if you had a negative experience as a kid, you know, and you were said something stupid and you got embarrassed, now every time you go to say something, that vibe comes out and he goes, oh, remember this thing that happened to you? Don't say that. And it comes back, right? So I like to say that I go in there with beneficial frequencies and we go in to eliminate that disturbance in the field a little bit, right? So that now we're processing this clean and we're not putting it through the filter of some past experience that doesn't really mean anything.
Oh, wow. So it's a very subtle subconscious level. And adding to that, so you have people that come to work with you. Can you share some interesting stories or moments of transformations that you've witnessed throughout working with different people?
Sure. Well, you know, the number one reaction I get from everybody is, and it's my favorite is when it's a first timer and there's a lot of skepticism and stuff like that because I'm walking around you, dinging these forks, you know, and it's sure, you're helping me. Yeah. But then, you know, it hits people. And the number one reaction I get is I feel light. I feel like I'm not carrying any baggage. And a lot of times that comes with a reaction. Even I have people on a massage table. And, you know, I'll go back to my own experience. My first time having someone tune me, you know, before I started training, I wanted to find a practitioner to experience it myself. And halfway through the tuning, I burst out into tears and started crying like a little baby. Not tears running down my eyes, like, you know, full on, like, can't control myself. And, you know, I was in a kind of a meditative state. So I kind of snapped out of it and I'm like, I'm not a crier. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And, you know, the practitioner who was working on me basically said, you know, you have these repressed things. A lot of men have it. It's very common. And what we're doing here is we're breaking down that dam, and now all these emotions are flying through that you held down as long as you could. And now they're flying through and you're processing them. And you started crying like a baby.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's a very common reaction. I get a lot of criers. You know, I get people who start going into tears. I get people who get messages popped in their head, like a whisper. This, you know, and to me, it's me clearing something out and letting something through that should have been getting through a long time ago. You know,
like a release. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
and it essentially, you know, in so many ways, it brings you back to your baseline. You know, your life is all these experiences, good and bad, and you know, if you can get rid of some of those bad things in there, you're more of a blank slate again. You know, you can start over. You can process things. You can get on the treadmill if you want to lose weight. You can all the things that stop us from improving ourselves. So like even with biofield tuning, I don't like to say I'm curing anything. It's like I am helping your body do what it's supposed to do. So by clearing your field, your body can fix itself and overcome whatever is in the way.
Yeah, our bodies are
You know?
so incredible. Like
Yeah.
I kind of got
People forget, you know?
Yeah, I woke up to that when I had my first son, and I, you know, all of a sudden my body created breast milk. I'm breastfeeding. I'm doing this. I'm like, what is my body doing?
It's a miracle.
I feel like the same person, but my body is changing and morphing and to support a life, right? And so I can imagine there's so much happening that we are not even aware of. Right. So people
Sure.
like you that are able to bring you back to, you know, some type of, you know, the state where you are at your best, that then your body can work at its optimal health. Right. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
And honestly, any woman who goes through pregnancy and all that stuff, it's a miracle. Honestly, how does all this happen? Even the intuitions, the things you get when you know something's wrong, when you like, I mean, there's your body it's, you know, it's the ultimate in creativity. You're creating a life, and
Yeah.
it's a crazy system. My wife had we had a tough pregnancy with my daughter, and
Yeah.
we were supposed to go in for a C-section. We had 2 weeks. It was my first kid, and I'm like, okay, I got 2 weeks to kind of settle into this new role, right?
Yeah.
And my wife got a headache, and she hadn't gotten a headache her whole pregnancy. And she's like, you know what? I don't like this. Something's wrong. She went in to her OBGYN, and he said, I don't know what's going on, but I have a bad feeling. He's like, we're going to go in tomorrow, take the baby out. So my 2 week little notice of putting the cribs together and all that stuff, gone, right? So to the next day, my wife has a C-section, take out the baby. Afterwards, we're recovering. The doctor said you were getting ready to go into labor, and if you went into labor, you and the child would have both bled out. He said it was a very rare condition where um, the umbilical cord was growing out of the bottom of the placenta, and the baby was on top of it. So I guess what would have happened if she would have gone into labor is something, a blood vessel, something would have ruptured, and we could have lost both my wife and my child.
Oh.
And we prevented all that because she had a headache, and it didn't seem right.
Yeah.
Now,
She listened to her intuition.
everyone gets a headache every once in a while, right? I mean, yeah,
What
like,
is, yeah.
what is it in this complex system of, a woman's body that set that off? You know what I mean? There's so much we don't understand. And I think we try to explain these things to ourselves so much that we don't think they're real anymore. You know what I mean? When sometimes you don't need to analyze things, you just need to be, you know?
Yeah, we want a scientific proof, facts to back everything
Yeah.
up.
And you know what?
sometimes
We
you
don't
just have that.
understand. I mean, scientists 100 years ago were at the top of their game and knew everything. It's the same now. 100 years from now, we don't know anything. And instinct and, your spirit and what you feel is really powerful. And I think more people need to pay attention to those things.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Our podcast is called Rise Up and Fix It. And in order to really, truly rise up, we have to be aware of the things that are suppressing us, repressing us.
Exactly.
And then tuning in to things that make us feel good. High frequency foods, high frequency essential oils, high frequency sounds. So then we can really start fixing things and enjoying this life and the joy that could be our life.
Exactly. And it's all about what we surround ourselves with and what we're taking in vibe wise, and even you talk about foods. I mean, what do you think has a better frequency? An apple that you took off a tree or a piece of candy that was made in a factory somewhere? You know what I mean? It's aside from the nutritional value, you're this is the earth, and we're all one. You know what I mean? And we all work together, and the natural frequencies, anything natural is always going to help us.
On the topic of frequencies, like we listen to music all the time. It's around us, it's on the radio, it's everywhere. What is the modern frequency tuned at, and how does that affect us? And because as a sound technician, you worked for Warner Music for years, I'm assuming you would know what most music what frequency most music is recorded in.
Sure. And, honestly, even just as a musician, any musician could tell you the baseline frequency is A440. And essentially that was made, I think it's only been around for 150 years. But it was made so that everyone can play together. So we have a baseline to tune to. So if you were going to tune a guitar and go play a gig in Italy or somewhere else, they're tuning to the same thing. So it was kind of made that we're going to tune everything to 440. So all music is tuned to that, right? Now you also have different intervals in music. So if you play an A, you can play a note that in the major scale that sounds happy and affects you one way, or you could play like a flat 5. So if you were going to play an A and then you play an E, that's a fifth from A, B, C, D, E, right? And a fifth is part of the major scale, and it sounds nice. If you make the fifth flat, which means you drop it down a half step. So instead of E, you're playing an E flat. Now you've got a tritone, which hundreds of years ago was banned by the church, by a lot, because it sounds evil. So just that little move in the interval between the sounds affects the way you're going to feel when you hear it. Most heavy metal music and stuff like that uses the flat 5. So that's
Yeah.
kind of different than the tuning we're talking about at 440. So 440 is just the baseline we tune to, right? So you can make happy music with it and it's fine. And there's a lot of there's some conspiracy about it that they made us tune to 440 because the other 432 has healing benefits and they don't want you to get the healing benefits and all that stuff. And there's a lot of talk of, ancient people tuned to 432 or whatever. The truth of it is that we never measured the sound until we invented time. And, having a second wasn't a thing until, a little over 100 years ago. Seconds and time and minutes and stuff like that is how we measure these frequencies. So a lot of the conspiracies that say the ancient people knew, they didn't really know anything because we didn't measure. So we don't know what they were playing. They could have been playing, you know, tuning to 432 or whatever, but it's not an assumption we can make.
Okay.
We do read frequencies from ancient structures. That is a
Hmm.
thing because everything vibrates. It's on the ground. I mean, there's burial mounds in Ireland that are from 3000 BC. That are measure at 111 hertz. There's temples, ancient temples, same thing, all measured at 111, and 111 is associated with altered states,
Hmm.
meditation, stuff like that. So, if you were doing a religious ritual or something like that, and you had 111 playing, just like when you're meditating and you're listening to alpha waves, it would put you in that state. So we do
Hmm.
have that. But I think modern music, if you're going to talk about how that affects us, has more to do with the intervals and stuff we're using. Major and minor scales. Major is happy, minor is sad. For some reason, I think the statistic is 75% of people prefer music in a minor key than to a
Hmm.
major key, which is sad music. Stairway to Heaven's a great example of a minor song. You know what I mean? It's got kind of a somber feel, and you could hear the difference starkly. The reason for that, who knows? You know what I mean? It's interesting, but in modern music, there's so much going on, even lyrically too, that
Yeah.
that can, you know, it lives in your subconscious.
Hmm.
These are events and information you're taking in. You don't think of it that way, but you're taking it in. There was a few years in college when I, was a little depressed and down, and I was listening to Alice in Chains, Nirvana, all this music, and it's all about being sad. And I'm just like, well, this
Hmm.
isn't a coincidence, right? I mean, you watch a
Hmm.
movie with a scary music soundtrack, you're on edge, right? If you
Hmm.
replace that music with children's songs, you're probably not actually children's songs can be kind of scary too in that scene. But if you were to
Hmm.
replace it with like, I don't know, something happy, you're not going to be on the edge of your seat. These things
Hmm.
put you in a state. So
Hmm.
modern, even older music, some of old Bach stuff, it's dark, it sounds like heavy
Hmm.
metal, and
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
still affects us. All this stuff is information we're taking in and
Yeah.
processing somehow.
I'm
you
so
know
happy we're talking about this because I feel like a lot of people don't even think about what they're listening to. Like, and I just kind of over just the last couple years, when I became a mom, like listening to the radio, now I'm so mindful what music is playing, what lyrics that are playing in the background that my kids are exposed to. Like, I make a point now to really pay attention because there's times where like my son's been like, "Mommy, what is that?" Well, I'm like, "Oh my god," you
yeah,
know. Sorry, click, I'll change it. Um, so it's interesting. And then if you think about our history, like, so I don't know if you know much about, oh God, I think it was John Lennon's Imagine.
Mm,
That was banned in the 60s. And, that was a pro peace song. That was like world peace. And it was, banned. I mean, there's all these conspiracy theories behind it,
sure.
time, everything goes now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's everything. It's your mood. I mean, music
Hmm.
puts us. It brings back memories. It puts you. It does. It's such a powerful thing.
Hmm.
And John Lennon specifically, you're talking about Imagine. That song
Hmm.
was the full package. The lyrics, everything
Hmm.
was made for peace. It was all about just being together and not fighting. And I believe they recorded that to 528 hertz, which is the love frequency.
Wow. No, they
I'm almost
didn't.
positive that was 528 because John Lennon, I think,
Wow.
had this theory that if he could inspire other people to record in that frequency range, it would help society and it would make people happier. And
Maybe that's why it got
maybe he's right.
banned. Yeah.
And it's so hard to like know what's what, and sometimes in these like stories,
Yeah.
but someone killed John Lennon.
Yeah.
He was all about peace. He made beautiful music.
Who
Assume
knows?
what you want, but it seems like he was onto something. You know, from my
Wow.
point of view. And it's weird. I came up listening to heavy metal and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and I saw Metallica a few weeks ago, and the music is dark, but I felt good being there because it brought back memories from when I was a kid, and I like to play guitar. So there's
Hmm.
this weird thing on how. All right. Why am I happy listening to angry music? Because that's a thing
Hmm.
too. There's a lot of people that
Hey.
maybe it's an outlet. Maybe they're expressing anger and getting something off their chest.
Hmm.
Maybe it's memory related.
Hmm.
But I like to look at all these things. If you're gonna
Hmm.
listen to some dark stuff, make it like
Hmm.
junk food. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You don't
Yeah.
survive on junk food.
Or
You have
just
a good time with it every once in a while, but you know what I mean? You got to take in the good,
yeah.
to
I heard
counter.
I have a theory based on that. Like I feel like it all depends on what kind of vibe you're getting from it, right? So if you're getting excited and
Yep.
it's elevating you and helping you, I think that's a good thing. Like sometimes I heard something about I read something or it was a long time ago. It was about someone talking about like if you love it, it all depends on what is going on the inside. If you are
Absolutely.
liking it, it's going to have a positive
Mm.
effect on your body. But if you're feeling bad listening to it, then it's not good,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then there's
Totally.
that added layer, where it's like, okay, but even if you do feel good, there could be something, how can you improve it another level? Like maybe change the
Sure.
lyric, like those little things, right?
Sure.
So it all plays, like it's all,
Yeah.
And
plays.
it's interesting because so many people gravitate towards a more angry, rebellious kind of music. Fight the man kind of thing. 60s and all that stuff. It was all about changing society. And I
Yeah.
think part of that anger we're hearing is because we're living in a society and the way things are, and we're not
Yeah.
right. We don't feel right. So something
Yeah.
about that fight the power kind of thing and that anger, like you can't do this to me, it
Mm-hmm.
resonates with people because we're put in a position to where we
Mm-hmm.
want to be rebellious. So I think that's part of it too. It's all, and like you
Mm-hmm.
said, people take it in differently. Everyone vibrates differently. So you're going to
Mm-hmm.
interact with vibrations different than I do, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all how you take it in because you have a lot of people who go, cannot listen to this kind of music. I'm a
Yeah.
Catholic. The church doesn't like a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a load of crap in
Yeah.
some ways. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
people are individuals, both personally and the way they vibrate, and it
Yeah.
affects them differently. You
Like
know.
I'm a meditator. I know Ina is too. And I mean, but I still love, upbeat rock and roll. I grew up listening to Metallica, the Beastie Boys, Jane's
Oh,
Addiction,
totally.
like powerful stuff.
Yeah.
I went to shows, concerts from the age of like 12, onwards up. I'm like, I love music, but I love all of it, but I can feel definitely the difference of like, listening to some like heavy, strong AC/DC and then going to like a state of alpha meditation music. Like I'm like, whoa, my body can feel this, right? Like right.
Sure.
So I think that there's some good. And then also like when I listen to like meditated music, meditative frequency music, like 528 and all these things, like I don't think I could be listening to that driving. Like I'd be probably like I'd probably be in a
Sure.
hip
Well,
hypnotized,
that's
right?
an excellent point you bring up there
Yeah.
because the way we consume music has changed, right?
Yeah.
So if we were young in the 60s and we were listening to Jimi Hendrix and we wanted to listen to Black Sabbath and some darker stuff, we had to go home and put it on the record player,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't a soundtrack to your life. You didn't work out with it on, you didn't drive with it on, it wasn't in every moment of your life.
Hmm.
Now we listen to music during everything. It's kind of become background.
Hmm.
Back then when you put a record on the player, a new album came out, you sat around it with your friends, and that's what you were doing. We're listening to this, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now it's kind of become this soundtrack to our life, and we have it everywhere. Part of it, it's a little devalued that way, I think, because we're not really paying attention. But you could
Mm-hmm.
also look at it like I brought up the example of a scary movie, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
on edge because the soundtrack makes you feel that way. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
you're consuming music constantly all day, there's people that fall asleep with it on their headphones. Now, if it's good stuff, that's one thing. But if it's something
Mm-hmm.
that's a little darker, a little depressing, it's not too far fetched to think that it's going to put you in that state.
And just to
Mm-hmm.
add to that,
Just like a rebellious song makes you want to go fight the man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
it devalues silence, right? And now you've got people intentionally going on silent meditation retreats, and they say how
absolutely.
difficult it is because we're just so used to being surrounded by noise and that it's almost uncomfortable to sit in silence. And then you're so aware of your
That's the
thoughts
point, right?
in that silence, and your programming just really starts showing up. And on that note, also, do you do sound healing in group settings? And how is that different from working one on one with a person?
So when I do a group setting, a lot of biofield tuning is very specific to the person. So if you're tuning a group, there could be some. It's more general. If I'm going to tune a group, I'm going to tune things that are very general to people. When I have a one-on-one session, I'm going through your chakras with a pendulum. I'm finding exactly what's going on with you and where there might be a disturbance in your field, and I'm doing it specifically to you. So when I do a group setting, a lot of times, I don't exactly tune people with the forks. I have another thing I do where I play the forks. I have them on a pedal that I hit with my feet, and I can control with which fork goes off. And I play the guitar tuned to 528, like John Lennon's Imagine. So I'll play
Wow.
these songs through the 528 hertz with the forks going, and other intervals of the solfeggio frequency, like we spoke, the do, re, mi. Now, if I'm playing in 528, I could play anywhere in those intervals from 528, and it's also a beneficial sound because they work together. It's like a chord, right? They're in harmony with one another. So for groups, a lot of times I do essentially a musical performance. Last night I played in a salt cave for a group of people. They
Wow.
were laying down with warmed eye patches on, eye covers on, and
Mm-hmm.
just taking it in. And when
Wow.
these sessions stop, I'll do it for an hour, and I'll always ask them questions. How's everyone feeling? And it's always just silent. No one can talk.
And it's like,
Which,
I
you
feel
know,
awesome.
and I say, I used to perform, and if my audience fell asleep, it was a bad thing. But now I know it's a good. People pass
Yeah.
out and they're just out of it. But that's what it does. I mean, you're getting tuned. You know what I mean? We're readjusting you. We're putting you back to baseline. We're allowing you to take in good, especially at 528. That's the love frequency. That's it's you feel it when you haven't had it a lot. So it's funny seeing these people kind of wobble out afterwards.
So interesting. So there are a lot of single people out there, and if they wanted to find love, would you encourage them to tune into the 528
Absolutely,
frequency?
absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
you know what? And it's not going to bring love to you, but it's going to allow you to be open to it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, especially these days, there's so much online and social media, and you see this, you see that. You kind of close yourself off to pure love.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a material thing. Like, oh, this person married this guy, and they've got a boat, and they do this, and you're not thinking about the raw love that you thought about before you saw all these things. Love
Mm-hmm.
was a reaction to something you heard, saw, smelled, anything. You know what I mean? And now
Mm-hmm.
it's all just it's a business almost, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some people are afraid of love,
Exactly. So for finding love,
afraid of being
that
hurt.
528 will open you up to receiving it.
Wow.
Wow. Where would you recommend people find these frequencies? Do you offer anything like that in your courses, or do you recommend any websites or
Well, I
where?
have personally, I have a Spotify page with a bunch of
Okay.
music. All the stuff I play, like I did at the Salt Cave and stuff like that, I have it recorded. And I'm also, like I said earlier, an audio engineer. So if you ever listen to that stuff, you put headphones on, it moves around, it comes towards you and goes behind you. And we
Cool.
move frequencies from ear to ear, which I don't know if you heard of binaural beats,
Yes.
is a really interesting thing because it's not natural. You
Mm-hmm.
can't, binaural beats are supposed to be listened to one frequency in one ear and one in the other, right? Normally, before the invention of headphones, that's impossible because your other ear would always hear the other frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's an example of kind of hacking the brain because that's not really natural because I don't know how anyone from way back when would even accomplish that without a pair of headphones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this is a case where something modern actually was good.
Mm-hmm. That's why.
But
So
and in other places, just to answer your question, honestly, it sounds crazy, but YouTube, you could find so many different frequencies and meditations, and it really is, you know, and hopefully they cancel out the frequency of YouTube.
yeah. So is that why they always say you're supposed to wear headphones when you listen to binaural beats?
Binaural, yeah, to get the
Yeah.
real effect. This ear
Okay.
should not hear what's coming out of this ear, and vice versa.
I didn't know that. I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm not. No one's home. I'm just going to blare it." But
And
now I
it
understand why. Okay.
and it's really interesting. I have, my tuning forks. Uh, when I hit a tuning fork, I could feel the vibration in my hand. You could feel the thump. It's kind of like a wave. You could hear a boom, boom. You could feel it, right?
Yeah.
There's certain frequencies that when you put them together, if I hit both forks and I butted the ends of them together, I could
Mm-hmm.
feel the vibration in each hand. And then when you put them together, they come together in a totally new vibration.
Wow.
Wow.
So these two might be going really fast together, and as soon as I touch them, they slow down and they sync up.
Wow.
So essentially, the binaural beats are doing that inside of your head,
Oh my God, that's awesome.
which and that is how the biofield tuning works in general. It's your vibration hitting the vibration of this fork, coming back and making a new vibration.
Can that help sync couples too?
You know what? That is, I've never worked on couples specifically for that reason, but that's a real thing. In all
Mhm.
honesty, and not to bring back my guitar analogy, which I love to use because I love guitar, but now picture the strings as a family, right? I mean, one string's out of tune. Dad's
Mhm.
depressed, or mom is angry.
Mhm.
It's going to vibrate out, and the kids and the spouse and everyone's going to be affected. You know what I mean? It's
Mm.
a family is the ultimate unit. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
if one of those units is off and out of tune, it's going to make everything else out of tune. Just like putting
Mhm.
those fingers down, it's not going to sound good. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
couples, there is no I. There is us, and they're the two forks coming together to vibrate. And if one is off, the other one's gonna be off. I notice if I'm in a bad mood, my wife's gonna be in a bad mood too because she doesn't like to see that, and she feels my vibe, and it's changing her vibration now. People don't think of it that way, but it's especially as a parent, it's everything to have a good vibe around your family.
Mhm.
You
Yes.
know,
Wow. So, okay. So, if we all understood the profound effects of music and frequencies and how it affects our bodies, it might lead to changes, I'm hoping, in the way that music is created in the future, right? Do you see that in happening? Do you see that like part of our future, or is that going to be a very big would it require a big change? Like, what do
you
you
know,
think?
I do, and that's kind of a different view than most people have because all music production and everything is going the direction of AI right now, which is the exact opposite of what we want because it's such a human
Mm,
experience, right? Now,
okay.
a lot of people think musicians are going to disappear, composers, engineers, the technical side, engineering, mixing, there's a good
Mm,
chance that might disappear because you could program that kind of thing.
mhm,
When it comes to playing music and the human connection, as we've been progressing through the industry, it's gotten less and less. We've got auto tune that makes your voice sound good. We've got you correct everything. There's beat correction on drums now so that everything's perfect.
mhm,
And when everything's perfect and right on beat, you lose that human aspect because humans
mhm,
are not perfect. You're going to
mhm,
have, the Beatles songs sounded great because of Ringo's groove. Now, if we
mhm,
put Ringo's drums into a quantizing plugin, which is what we do as engineers to make drums sound tighter, you're going to completely lose the human swing that the Beatles had, right? Because now everything's perfect. They're not playing together anymore. Everything's mechanical. So in my mind, we've gotten to this point. So now I think human beings naturally like to rebel. And I think people are going to want to start to see live music now. Everything's becoming more mechanical, less human. Seeing someone out there, putting it out there, making mistakes, uh, willing to show people those mistakes. That's part of the magic of watching a musician play, is knowing the courage it takes to go in front of people and do that kind of thing. This is all going to become more valuable, I think, because we're missing it. It's just like, instead of buying a guitar mass produced in a factory, if you're buying one that was handcrafted by someone, that means a lot more. It's got more value. And I think we're going in that direction. I think music will become more human. And with that, I think we're going to go back to some of the older things, and we're going to start looking at how these frequencies affect us. If you listen to Jimi Hendrix, I mean, as a guitarist, I can hear mistakes all over his playing. He'll hit a bad note, and then he'll just bend it up, and you go, "Oh!" And that's what Jimmy is, still, right?
Yeah.
If he came out today, we would be correcting all this stuff, and he wouldn't be who he is, And that's in a lot of music,
Yeah.
that's what it
Wow.
is. It makes us unique. There's no map to creativity, right? And if you put things through AI or some kind of digital thing that manipulates it, it's putting it in a map, in a box, right? Songwriters, like, you have songs now. There's new Jimi Hendrix songs written by AI.
Wow.
So you mean to tell me, when the Beatles were doing the mop top thing, right? If John Lennon was un- killed before Sergeant Pepper's and all the experimental stuff, you mean to tell me AI would have wrote that stuff? Like, no way. Like, it's people are going to catch on to how much it's drying up music and any kind of art, I think. And I think they're going to want to go back to that human experience of hands-on playing, standing in the room, seeing it, feeling the vibe of the musicians together. That's a big thing. If you watch a good band, they play together, and it's subconscious. I mean, it's there's a vibe, and I think we're going to go back to that.
Is it easy to tune it to like 528 and still have it sound similar, or does it really sound different if you were
It
to start?
really sounds. You know what? I can pull out a guitar right now if you want to hear what it
Okay.
sounds like.
Yeah, I'd
But
love
it's
to. Can you bring one up?
sure.
Can you? Yeah, why not?
So essentially, what you have to do is, I had to buy a special tuner
Okay.
and change, because the standard tuning frequency is 440. So most tuners you buy are just going to be set at that. So I found a tuner that allowed me to change what I tune to. And essentially, if you're familiar with a piano at all, there's a middle C. The C is right in the middle, and that's kind of your middle frequency. So when I do these shows with the guitar and the forks, I tune my middle C to 528, so that everything around it is an interval of that 528. I'll be right back. Give me one sec.
Okay. This is awesome. I feel like we need to get this out to like every big musician out there. Like, let's get
Yeah.
everyone that's making music right now. Let's get the Biebers, the Taylor Swifts, the Kanyes, all these huge musicians. Like, let's get them recording in 528.
Love it.
Yeah.
I think there's something to it. And honestly, all it takes is me just hitting all the strings. I won't even put my fingers down, and you're gonna go, ah. Check it
Okay.
out. I can't do any of that on a standard guitar,
Wow, that
and
is
that's
beautiful.
and that's
Beautiful.
just me tooling around. You know what I mean? And it's just you
We
feel
know
it when you hear it.
we're supposed to be listening to that. Like, I feel like we gotta get all these big guys. I was telling Ina, like the Biebers, the Taylor Swifts. Let's get them all, changing how they make their music.
I'm telling you.
Let's create a new trend, or at least
Yes.
start. Anyone listening to this podcast,
Yes.
if you're inspired or you know a musician and maybe they have never heard of this stuff before, let's get that message out there. Let's
Totally.
get them to tune into Larry. Take your course.
Hey, I've got stuff on Spotify. Listen to it. Get inspired. Make your own stuff. You know what I mean? It's important, and it should spread.
Yeah, for our season finale for season 2, we interviewed Becky Regan, who created the Birdsong Project. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was all music set to bird sounds. Her dream is to create a Spotify channel where it's bird themed. So I think we should create a Spotify channel specifically for the 528 hertz, all different artists contributing different songs.
Like actually, a flower buds by hearing the sound of a bird chirp.
It does, and honestly, frequencies affect plants very much. There's people who I know Biofield tuning practitioners who tune their garden and they swear it grows better.
Yeah.
And
But
real quick on the topic of the birds,
yeah.
a lot of people who study music think that that's how music started. If you listen to Latin music, for example, there's a lot of kinds of Latin music. There's mambo, there's salsa, just a ton of it. To a lot of us, it just sounds like Latin music, right? To musicians and drummers, there's different timings of the beats that make that kind of music its own genre. And there's slight little differences. So a lot of people studied the birds in the various areas where these different kinds of Latin music came from. And long and behold, the chirping birds mimicked the specific beats and sounds of what makes this music what it is, right? The basis of this beat goes like da 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 da, right? There's a bird where that came from that does that. And that's how someone got the idea, God knows how long ago, to do it.
Wow.
So they're hearing the different chirps from different parts of Latin America, and it's coinciding with the kind of music that came out of those places.
Thank you so much for joining us, Larry. This was so informative and so inspiring. We can't wait to hear more from you in season 4.
Yes.
Absolutely. This was wonderful. I love talking to you, ladies. I appreciate the time. Because I know a lot of your audience is female. I'm out here for men. I mean, there's not a lot of men doing this stuff. 99% of my clients are female. And I don't know what it is about men who they think, I think maybe they think this is not for them for some reason. So a big part of what I do is I like to try and open this up to them as well. Because there's some kind of stigma. I don't know why guys have a problem with being around sound bowls and stuff like that. Not all of them, but it is largely female, and I think a lot of men would really benefit from doing this as well.
If you enjoyed our interview today, please share and like it.
And if you have a unique story on how you are creatively engaging with the world, we can help you share it in a multitude of different ways. We are experts in crafting stunning photos, videos, and compelling narratives. Our mission is to make you and your brand stand out.
Please visit our website, www.riseupandfixit.com, to learn more and to connect with us.